The Ocarina of Time, one of the most iconic items in the Zelda franchise, but strangely enough only appears in two games, Majora's Mask and, well, Ocarina of Time. This item disappeared without a trace of its existence remaining. Most fans are alright with this, for several different reasons. For the longest time, I too was okay with this because I always assumed Nintendo would find some clever way to bring back the item. But it's a very interesting topic nonetheless. So today we are going to answer one simple question. What happened to the Ocarina of Time? But before we get into that, I would like to ask that you scroll down and check to see if you're subscribed. I understand that every YouTuber asks this, and it does get really annoying, but it really helps me out. So if you like this video, consider subscribing. Back to the main topic, because The Legend of Zelda is spread into 3 different timelines, we need to identify the Ocarina's position in all 3 timelines, starting with the adult timeline. So initially, it seems pretty hard to identify where the Ocarina is because, well, the old Hyrule is now underneath the waves, and the people live in a new life in a new kingdom. But surprisingly enough, the adult timeline is actually the easiest to pinpoint the Ocarina's location. We have to go back in time to before Hyrule was flooded, when Ganon broke out of Seal. Now, remember, when Ganon broke out of Seal, chaos flooded the land, and I mean chaos. Now, what's important is that the Ocarina's main purpose was to open the Door of Time. This is a very important detail. For starters, the Master Sword no longer rests in the temple, it rests in the castle. Side theory, the fact that the Master Sword was moved to the castle implies that there was a hero between Wind Waker and Ocarina of Time. After all, only someone with the spirit of the hero can move the sword from its pedestal. This hero, however, was not strong enough to defeat the King of Thieves, thus why he's no longer remembered as a hero. This is where the golden goddesses come in. What do you do when your own hero can't defeat evil? You take matters into your own hands. This led the decision to flood Hyrule. But you can see the golden goddesses couldn't tell the people a week's notice before this flood. Otherwise, Ganon might have come up with a plan to escape. The golden goddesses pretty much told the people, we are doing this. If you want to survive, drop everything you're doing immediately and go to the mountaintops. You only have time to take the essentials with you. Because the Master Sword was no longer in the temple, and the fact that the temple was flooded, the Ocarina was useless. So, Ocarina was most likely left at the bottom of the Great Sea. Now that we have pinpointed the Ocarina's location in the adult timeline, we can now move on to the child timeline. Now, the child timeline, we have a confirmed reappearance of the Ocarina of Time in Majora's Mask. The Ocarina was given to Link by Zelda, and stays with Link throughout the rest of the game. Now, I don't really have a lot of evidence for this, but I think there are 3 possible options. Option 1. The Ocarina was stolen by whoever killed Link. Now, we don't really know who killed Link and when, but it's possible whoever was the one to end the Hero of Time knew the ocarina's importance and decided to take it. Option 2. The ocarina never left the Hero of Time's possession. This option is similar to option 1, except this time the killer did not take the ocarina. After all, on the outside it's just a normal ocarina, which would mean the Ocarina of Time is in the Hero of Time's grave. Option 3. The Ocarina of Time was returned to the royal family. To me, this is the most likely option. For one, the ocarina could have been returned before or after Link died, but the main reason I believe this is because in Twilight Princess, we see tributes to the Ocarina of Time in the form of howling stones. These were likely constructed by the royal family because we can sing Zelda's lullaby. But another person who could have built it was also Saria. With the adult and child timeline out of the way, we can now move on to the downfall timeline. The thing about the downfall timeline is that the map is much smaller than it was in Ocarina of Time. This is probably because the imprisoning war was so destructive that there wasn't much of it left. With that being said, is there any proof that the ocarina still exists? In A Link to the Past, you can find a boy in the overworld playing a flute. After the boy finishes his song, he disappears. Later in the game, the player can find the flute boy in the Dark World, and he will ask you to dig up the flute for him. After the dig up the flute, you can play it for the flute boy. Shortly after, he will transform into a tree. The player can then go to the bird statue in Kakariko. Playing the flute in front of the statue will allow you to unlock the game's warp points. But when we look at the flute sprite, we can see clearly that this isn't a flute. It's a blue ocarina. And while we don't hear of the other ocarina songs that we all know and love, the ocarina does share very similar characteristics with the Ocarina of Time, such as the ability to summon animals and healing broken souls. This leads me to believe that these two ocarinas are one and the same. So what happened to this ocarina? Well, in the credits, we learn that Flute Boy plays again. So does this mean that the ocarina was returned to Flute Boy? Well, yes, if Link to the Past was the last time we saw this ocarina. But in actuality, there is another game where we see this ocarina. And odds are you've never played it before. BS Legend of Zelda Ancient Stone Tablets. Now, I don't want to get too much into the history of the BS Zelda games. I'm not at all qualified to do that. But pretty much, you can no longer play any of the BS Zelda games anymore because these games were kind of like television shows. You could only play them at a certain point live, and the console no longer broadcasts games anymore, so pretty much the games on that console are worthless. But for most of you who haven't played this game, I will give you a brief explanation of the game's story. In Ancient Stone Tablets, you don't start off as Link. You start off as an avatar who we are going to call Lonnie for the sake of convenience. The game starts off in a different world, in the town whose name was stolen. Lonnie somehow gets teleported to the Kingdom of Hyrule, 7 years after A Link to the Past. You don't know why. Zelda claims that she has visions of Ganon's return. With the sudden rise in monsters, it becomes clear that the prophecy is coming to life. With Link gone for training and Sahasrara out looking for him, the Hyruleans are forced to turn to Lonnie for help. Lonnie goes through a quest to collect the ancient stone tablets to find clues as to Ganon's location. Lonnie then defeats Ganon, stepping out of the shadow of the Hero of Legend and solidifying her place as the Hero of Light. Now, I know that this game is debatable as to its canonicity, but when you play the game through, it becomes very clear that this game was intended to be canon, unlike some games. But what is important is that you can actually obtain the ocarina in this game. You receive it from Sahasrara's brother, Ajina. This leaves us with two explanations as to what happened to the ocarina. Option 1, Lonnie returned it to Agina before returning to her world. That would mean that the ocarina stayed within the wise man's family. After that, it's besides me. The guy in the cave originally in The Legend of Zelda is supposedly a descendant of the wise men, so maybe he has it? Or there is option B, where Lonnie kept the ocarina when she left Hyrule, meaning that the Ocarina of Time no longer exists. And that completes all three timelines. But wait, there's still one game that I haven't talked about, Breath of the Wild, a game that is turning 4 years old. Well, this is where you guys come in. I want to know where you guys think the Ocarina of Time is in Breath of the Wild. Let me know in the comments below. And who knows, if we can figure out the ocarina's true location, we might be one step closer to figuring out Breath of the Wild 2. I'm Mouse Penguin, and I'll see you guys later.